like to ask a question if they're there?
There's nobody.
All right, seeing none, the public hearing at 6:50 is adjourned. Go ahead and do your your board of control. Garret and Mike.
Bridget had one.
What's that?
Border control.
I thought Bridget had a chip hearing. Don't you have a
Oh,
hearing?
yeah, Bridget has another hearing.
Well, the agenda has the board of control between them two.
Okay. Oh, okay. So Garret and Mike, you guys are ready. We've got minutes from June 3rd that I need a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
any discussion on the minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Oh, excuse
And
me.
then we've got just one item.
I'll move that item.
I'll second
Okay.
it.
Any discussion on the item? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, and we can adjourn our board of control. Thank you.
Um,
Can you guys hear me? Because I'm not pictured, but I'm here.
Yeah. Have
Okay.
you been, have you been able to, the little control for the video?
No, I don't know where that is.
Oh, it's down near where the mute thing is typically. It's like looks like a little movie camera.
Yeah, I see it.
Just,
I'm
there
sorry.
you go.
There I am. Okay.
Imagine me
Dinner
giving
tonight,
technical
Jack.
advice.
Way to go.
well, we gotta wait till 7 o'clock, guys.
Nice to see you, Garret.
Nice to see you
Looks
also.
looks like you've made it online with no hassles this time.
Nope, pretty good.
Woohoo.
Proper prior preparation prevents poor performance. Right?
In other words, your kids got you on.
Yeah. You stole
Just
my
so
line,
every-
Mr. Mayor.
Just so everyone is aware, we are now live streaming on YouTube.
Hi.
FYI.
That means we're all just going to be quiet.
No, our community knows us well enough, I believe. I don't think they would use quiet to describe any of us. So.
I just hope that nobody thinks that the antenna hanging on my wall is too flashy. I don't want to, come across like braggadocious. I can remove that if you think it's too much.
Gwen, I thought you were just making a statement. That's all. A decoration statement.
Oh, I'm making a statement. Yeah.
Now that you mention it, I notice it.
Yeah, thanks. Now we're all going to see the antenna.
That's how I get my local news.
That's
Ah,
we do the same thing.
Yeah, it works really well.
Yep.
hmm. Well, it's nice to see the chief,
Mhm.
Chief Shear.
Good evening. It's nice to see you as well.
Nice to see Mike Lewis.
Good evening. How are you?
Good, good, and all the other staff. Well, I don't see all the staff. Some of you are hiding. Doesn't seem quite fair.
Jonah's got her mask on.
Yeah.
Hi, Bridget.
Hello.
Yeah, we can see Bridget.
They're just good.
As soon as I'm done with my
Funny.
public hearing, I'm going just to my name as well.
Ah,
Because that's it for me tonight, believe it or not, just the public hearing.
wow.
Oh, we're going to ask
Yeah.
questions to draw you in.
You'll have to go running back up to the microphone.
Bridget, I can hear you really well.
Well, this is my personal laptop. It's not my city laptop. That's the one I have
Oh.
problems with.
That's why.
This is my $250 laptop I got from Amazon that works better than the one I got at the city.
Oh.
When we get all that police money, we'll buy you a new one.
Hey now, hey now.
I heard someone say on Zoom not too long ago that the one thing that was good about Zoom is that there are many people are learning the variety of different home decorations and how they're able to look at what other people have in their homes and they're thinking, maybe I ought to do that. It's kind of funny. It cracked me up. I didn't think of that, that we do. And then, of course, Dave has his fake background, you know, he's
Yeah,
got,
the other nice thing about Zoom is that we've been able to have a lot more public attendance.
it is astounding.
Yes, we're very appreciative of that.
Yes.
But we'd
Yeah,
like to see the public. That would be nice too.
I think you're right. You're right.
Yeah.
You know, it's been difficult. We had to have our president induction. We actually had to videotape it because we couldn't have more than 10 people. So we haven't had Rotary meetings. What we did is we had 9 of us, and we went and we actually taped the induction ceremony. And I was really astounded at the feedback we got from people who said they really missed that interaction, but having done the induction on video, more people got to see it because now they're playing it for, you know, people who weren't thinking. So I guess sometimes it's good, sometimes it just seems.
Lesson learned. I think that maybe, you know, we really ought to consider this going forward as a way to involve the community more, even when we go back to in-person stuff.
I think we live stream every meeting. I've been saying that for 6 years, 7 years.
Happen. I agree.
I'm all for it.
Your phone keeps stinging.
We should have all that
How do
new
we get,
technology in our new city hall, right? So it should be just a snap to make it happen.
All we need is a laptop with a camera. Garret, just set it up there.
Each of us have our own little laptop
And
to
a new
look
city
into.
hall.
It's 7 o'clock. Let's get the second public hearing. The CHIP plan will, Amy, please call the roll.
Mr. Amrhein,
Here.
Mr. DeLeone,
Here.
Mr. Ferrara,
Here.
Mr. Kuhar,
Here.
Ms. Rosenberg,
Here.
Ms. Shaffer,
Here.
Mr. Sidoti,
Here.
Mr. Turner,
Here.
Ms. Wallach.
Here.
Okay, I understand, Bridget, you're gonna present the subject.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This is the second of 2 required public hearings that is being held to provide the public an opportunity to comment on a proposed amendment to the city's Community Housing Impact and Preservation Owner Occupied Housing Rehabilitation Fund program to allow for a portion of the money to be used for foreclosure or eviction prevention due to financial hardship as a result of the COVID-19 virus.
That it, Bridget?
Yes, it is. Thank you, Mayor.
Gotta ask the question. Is there somebody from the public that has questions? Seeing none, this public hearing is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll start off in committee discussions. The first one is the council committee of the whole I'll get it out. Code ordinance book update. Hope, are you presenting?
Yes, I am. Every year, our publisher, Walter Drain, now I believe it's American Legal, puts together a set of replacement pages for us to put in our codified ordinances. And state law and the Ohio Constitution requires that when certain traffic and criminal laws are changed at the state level, that we need to change them and amend them at the local level. So this ordinance proposes to change looks like about 6 traffic ordinances and about 5 criminal code sections so that they match state law.
Is there any questions? Can't go to the audience, so is somebody gonna make a motion to accept this?
Move to accept.
Second.
Emergency.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, the same sign. Okay, thank you. That's the only item for committee of the whole. Go into sidewalks committee, Mr. Sidoti.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have one item tonight, and that's the consideration of a water service extension request. And I believe Mr. Bowling is going to speak to that and is going to be. So, Mr. Bowling, are you going to be able to do that, or is Mr. Ruler going to precede you? Just out of curiosity.
You know how it works, Roger.
Yeah,
So,
I know.
so look, just a quick introduction. Jim needs no introduction, but the item needs just an explanation that Jim and Melanie and Rhonda have come to ask for your approval after a bunch of meetings internally, looking at water service around Malloy Road and State Route 43. And for those of you who know, that corridor has been a little slow to develop. We would certainly like to see more and more projects develop in that corridor. And it would be great if we could continue to pick up a few customers for our utilities in there, at least the water in this case. So from that sort of backdrop, we agreed that there's a current proposal from a developer to build a project that Jim can talk more about at the corner of Malloy there in 43. And it seems to make a lot of sense to extend the water, have the developer extend the water service down there. So that's kind of what we're coming to you. It's in the JED, and Jim can give you a little more details.
Sure, thanks, Dave. Like you said, a developer came about late 2018 to talk about being served utilities in this location. We'll leave off the complexities of it, but in the end, we have a 12-inch water line that ends at the site, and they've requested for us to serve them water. And per our JED agreement, we're required to provide access to utilities to anybody along this corridor. So the first request tonight is to go ahead and provide them access to water. The second is related to that. In the code, it requires that the property owner extend the water line throughout the total frontage of their property, if it doesn't exist there. Or if it does exist, that they be assessed the cost to build the line. In this case here, the developer is going to build the majority of the water line throughout the length of their property along the frontage, but at the southern end of 43, we run into a sanitary sewer force main and some other issues that prevent us from going down that side of the road. So what we would be asking council for is approval for, instead of mandating that they build a line, that we assess them the cost of building the line. And then when the time comes to go ahead and extend the line, we'll go ahead and extend it in the best location for future development to the south. So
I have a question.
those are the requests.
I have a question. Who's running the meeting?
Yep. Yes, Heidi. I'm sorry.
Thank you. All right. Well, maybe you're not the person to ask this, but maybe Dave can help. So does this beholden the nursing home operator to join the JED?
That property's already in the JED.
Well, yes, it's in the JED, but does that mean that they will become tax-paying members of the JED?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Yes.
Super. Let's give them water then. Well, sell them water.
Mr. Mayor, you look like you have a question.
No.
Oh, okay. Mr. Kuhar?
Yeah, so is our stub on the water on the south side of 261 already?
Yes, our stub is actually on the south side of Malloy Road.
Oh, it is on the south side of Malloy Road.
Correct.
Did we just do that like within the last 10 years?
No.
Okay. I thought we were talking about having problems doing that for the other development that was looking at the site where the mall was.
This line's been there, I don't know exactly when it was built, but I came in 2007 and it was already in place for a while before I got here.
Yeah.
Other questions from council?
One more.
Yes, Mr. Kuhar.
So with the arrangement of how you want to develop this, is this going to be a cost to the city or is it all going to be on the developer?
The costs are all on the developer.
All of them. Okay, great.
Okay. Any other questions? I don't know. Is there anyone connected, Amy, that might be interested from the audience? No. Okay. Back to City Council.
I would like to move approval of the water service.
Do we have a second?
The emergency.
With the emergency, yes.
Okay. So I got Heidi and then Gwen seconded.
Yeah.
Gwen got it, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, any other discussion? Yes, Heidi.
Yeah, I just think this is a win-win. And I would certainly like this to start a domino effect. Because as Dave said, we're looking for some development there. These properties have been on sale for a long time. And while I do like seeing, fields and, habitat for butterflies and things like that, it's really important for us to develop new water customers as well as new JED participants, for the financial health of the city. So I think this is great.
Gwen, do you have any other comments?
No, thank you.
Okay, any other comments from council? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That's it, Mr. Mayor, for streets and cities and sidewalks and all that good stuff.
We move into Health and Safety Committee. Mr. Amrhein.
Yes, we have one item to be discussed tonight, and that's 21st Century Policing Report by Chief Scherer. Dave, do you want to introduce?
Yeah. So council referred this item into committee, so we're happy to kind of give you a overview tonight in terms of the standards laid out a number of years ago now with the 21st Century Report, but we're also, hopefully Nick and Mike will have a chance to even go more current with some of the Ohio collaborative standards that we've been participating in. And if obviously this is a timely topic, and even Governor DeWine has had new things coming out of his office. So Ohio's been, Mr. DeWine's been around, he's been the AG, so he was involved in that for a number of years. And so I guess the good news is that this is a topic that Ohio's been dealing with, and we've done our best to kind of stay current on it. Like a lot of things, like anything we do, we're proud of the success we've had, but we always know we can do better. So it's really hard. There's so many conversations going on nationally right now that I think it seemed like a really good time to anchor those conversations in some real conversations about the local situation in terms of what are our local police doing? What are their requirements? What is their training like? Now, obviously, we have a brand new chief, Nick Shear's here, and we welcome him. And I think most of you know Lieutenant Lewis. They're both here in part because this is a team effort, obviously. I mean, it's a relatively small department. But again, we're proud of the accomplishments we're able to do with such a small staff. And in this case, I say a team effort. It's team. That team includes you guys. That includes the rest of our staff. It includes our community. It's something we've talked a lot about. Chief Lee was terrific at sort of opening up the police department and trying to make headway into the neighborhoods and connections. And really, Mike Lewis is kind of the point person on most of that stuff. Certainly, Nick's been involved in his role as captain and through the years, but I think more than anything, we're hoping to continue the engagement with you tonight, with the community, as we continue to work forward through all these issues and still provide for public safety in our community. So with that, Nick, I'll let you carry it forward.
Thank you, sir. I want to start by saying good evening to everyone. Lieutenant Mike Lewis and I are here tonight to talk to you about some of the measures we've undertaken within the department to address some of these issues related to the report on 21st century policing, and also some other things that we'll get into as well. For those who don't know, the President Obama compiled a task force of people from all walks of life, from all backgrounds, to investigate the tactics used in policing. In 2015, in May of 2015, he released a report through this task force, and it was called the Final Report on from the President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing. In that report, they identified 6 pillars to go by within their framework, and the pillars were identified as building trust and legitimacy. That's kind of the biggest one of them. Policy and oversight, technology and social media, community policing and crime reduction, training and education, and officer wellness and safety. With that report, they also identified 28 recommendations for local police departments to follow related to their report. So I've gone over the report in depth. It's about a 116-page document, and I went over it in depth and I identified all the recommendations. So what I can tell you right now is, of all those recommendations, 28 recommendations, we are fully in compliance with 25 of the 28 recommendations on that. I will go over the 3 that we're not in compliance with. The first one of those is to track and analyze the level of community trust. One of the things that the report recommends is that we have some method to survey the community to gauge the level of confidence and trust they have in the police department. Although we do not have that right now, as a staff, we've discussed some measures and have a cursory plan to get something up and running to develop a survey for the community to gauge that. The next thing that we're not completely in compliance with is having a diverse workforce. It's not a secret when you look around the city as a whole, where we're at in terms of diversity within the police department. Right now, we have 41 sworn employees and a total of 65 employees within the department as a whole. Out of our 41 officers, we have 1 non-white officer. In our 65 total employees within the police department, we have 2 non-white employees. A total of about 3% of the police department's workforce is non-white, and we know our community as a whole is about 20% non-white. So we're not, although we're not achieving that, we've undertaken a lot of measures to try to achieve that, and it's something that I think we've been frustrated citywide about, the lack of diversity within the workforce. Some of the things that we've done to address that are heavy recruiting efforts. We've recruited all over the place from within the community. Obviously, we have the resource of Kent State University in our city. We've been up there quite a bit. We've been to the University of Akron. We've reached out and had conversations with Tracy, Youngstown State, universities all over northeastern Ohio, really. We've spoken with police academies. We've tried to engage some social media efforts in various things. So one of the things that is positive that we've
Chair, do you want to take questions now, or would you prefer to wait till you're finished?
I apologize. Absolutely, right now. I apologize. I forgot to mention that up front. So
okay,
Tracy
Wallach has.
Okay. So I just wanted to know, when you go to these other universities, what is the diversity population like in their programs? I mean, is there a pretty good pool?
Generally speaking, there is a decent amount of diversity within the programs. So Lieutenant Lewis and I have both done some speaking just to some classes at Kent State University. And they are fairly diverse classes. Akron U, our experience there, again, has been some significant diversity. But generally speaking, at Akron U, we've only been in front of police academies, where at Kent State University, we've actually had some blocks put aside for us in some of the classes to teach certain days. So we've had more interaction there, obviously, kind of being in our backyard there. One of the things we are happy about is we have seen an uptick in the diversity in our testing. So over our last 2 tests, we've seen about a 10% non-white diversity rate in our applicant pool. So that is an increase from the past.
But the problem is that they're not testing well enough. Is that what's going on?
I mean, it's a mixture of things. So one of the things we certainly don't want to do is jeopardize our hiring practices. I think we have very high standards. I'm proud of that, and I feel that we should continue to have very high standards. So part of it's going to, you're going to see, we're bound by civil service law is going to be part of it. So where people score on the test, obviously, is that's how we get the names and the lists of people that we go by. Above and beyond that, the background investigation process has bumped some people out as well.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if now's the time to talk about, I don't know, suggestions, or do we do that at the council meeting? I don't know what we do. Like I have a suggestion. I have a suggestion for the city to maybe up its diversity with the police force. So should I wait till council?
I would wait till council. Let's have Chief Scherer finish up here, then bring that up during the council meeting. Tracy.
Okay.
Okay. Robin?
And while I'm speaking,
Robin Turner.
Yeah. Chief, the issue would seem to be simply the numbers game, apparently, which is the type of outreach that we're doing. You've already indicated where we're going and how we're trying to be a lot more inclusive and approaching universities and other more diverse, perhaps, communities. Can we look at what other communities are doing that are successful at the recruiting? Because at the end of the day, since we can't drop our standards, we have to increase our numbers. The greater the participation rate, the greater the possibility that we're going to be able to create the numbers, get the numbers of people in the pipeline that we need in order to create a more diverse workforce. And that's throughout the city. That's not just the police department, but we have a dearth of minority staff throughout the entire city. So that's something that we just have to start focusing on. I guess we'll sit down with Dave and some of the others to discuss exactly what we do there. But the issue, based on what happened, I'll tell you what. I'll leave that alone. We'll talk about that later in council. So thank you, Chief. I'm sorry to kind of interrupt your flow there. Sit back and listen now.
No problem. Thank you. I appreciate the feedback. I will be all ears when you speak later in the council meeting about suggestions. I think that you'll find that we are very open to any ideas that may help us in that area. So I appreciate the fact that you're coming with suggestions. We certainly need as many community partners as we can in that effort, and certainly all of you as community leaders to help, provide some guidance and some suggestions and support in that area. So I really appreciate that. I will move on to the last of the three. I'm sorry, is there another question?
Excuse me, yeah, Garret Ferrara has a question.
Hi, Chiefs. I just, you gave the percentage and number of non-white. How many female and what percentage female?
Okay, so I apologize. We do have currently 6 female employees. 6 female officers. Obviously, that's down 1 with Chief Lee's retirement. So we have 6 out of 41 total officers. So we're at about 14.5% female in terms of the officer ranks. When you move over to the dispatcher side of things, we have 13 employees on that side and only 2 males. So that's more heavily dominated by females on that side of the aisle.
And just relative to other police forces, how many women on as officers? A percentage ballpark, if you know?
I don't know an exact ballpark. I will say that we generally speaking have a higher number, I'd say percentage wise, than most police departments do. If I had to gauge it, I would say 10% or less is probably the average, at least in Northeast Ohio.
Okay, thank you. Nothing further. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. So the next thing that we don't exactly meet the recommendation on is they had a recommendation to establish some sort of civilian oversight. One of the things that we talk about internally when it comes to that is we have a very strict and comprehensive policy on personnel complaints and the personnel complaint procedure that we follow. Sometimes it's so comprehensive that sometimes we get questions sometimes from our employees internally on how rigorously we investigate things that sometimes seem very minor. But we believe in transparency. And if you look into our policy a little bit on personnel complaints, we'll take any complaint that comes in any way, shape, or form, in any fashion. It can be anonymous, and we investigate rigorously any complaint that comes in. We provide written feedback in terms of the results of the investigation to the person who does make a complaint. And we have, thick, thorough investigative files that go through multiple hands and are reviewed by multiple people before we come to a final conclusion as in terms of right or wrong when it comes to complaints. So although we don't have an established citizen oversight committee or board, I do feel that we do a very good job internally of dealing with those issues. So that's the
Hang on, Chief Scherer. Mr. Kuhar?
Yes, Chief, you say you address all complaints. Now, is an inquiry about something that's going on considered a complaint, or does a complaint have to be something that's formally written or addressed?
It does not have to be formally written. If someone calls in any way, shape, or form, reaches out to us on social media, emails, or anything, if there's an inquiry about, when I say complaint, I'm speaking.
Can't hear you.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
When I say complaint, I'm speaking mostly of officer conduct type complaints, whether they agree, don't like the way a call was handled, they're complaining about misconduct or anything like that. That's what I'm referring to when I say complaints. So no matter how that comes in, we look into it, we investigate it. Sometimes it may be as simple as watching a cruiser video of the interaction between the person and the officer. It could be that simple. Just depends on the nature of the complaint and what resources we have available to us to look into it.
Now, do you say you will give a written response, or could you also, are you given like maybe a phone call response or?
Yeah, I guess again, it depends. I mean, if the person wants to make a formal complaint, they're going to get a formal written response. There are times where the person doesn't really wish to pursue a formal complaint. To us, that's not okay. I mean, it's okay if somebody doesn't want to pursue a formal complaint. Investigate it like it's a formal complaint and give them feedback.
Can't hear it.
yeah. You keep fading out.
I'm sorry, is this any better?
A little bit.
I think that's good for me, but your voice is coming and gone.
Apologize. I might be putting my hands over my microphone.
Okay, Tracy?
Yeah, so I wanted to know, we've been finding out with these incidents that we've been seeing in the news, that these officers who are involved in it seems like every officer that's been involved in them have had many complaints filed against them. And I wondered, what kind of actions does our police department take if there's an officer that has multiple complaints? I mean, how do we deal with them?
Well, it's one of those things. Obviously, we have a filing system, a record system of knowing how many complaints officers have. And I think the most important thing to look at is what is the conduct? Is it similar conduct to related in all the complaints? Obviously, if you start to see very similar conduct related to multiple complaints on one officer, it's time to first and foremost look into some training aspect. Can we correct this behavior in some way, shape, or form? Obviously, we're not going to allow inappropriate or disrespectful behavior to continue. So our first step is going to be to look into it, see if there's a pattern, and seek some sort of training that we can provide, whether it's internally or outside the department, to try to correct that behavior.
Does that answer your question, Tracy?
Yeah, and what if if it's not corrected, then are they dismissed?
So we follow a progressive discipline system. It's spelled out in our policies. Obviously, we have the union contracts in that element of things to deal with as well. But we do have a progressive discipline system. So generally speaking, that if we provide some sort of remedial training to someone and it proves to not be effective, we're going to progress we're going to move forward into the progressive discipline process. So now, obviously, the seriousness of the accusation, the seriousness of the officer's conduct can put us into that process at different places depending on the conduct. In some conduct, quite honestly, it is subject to termination on a first offense. So it really depends on the nature of the complaint and the conduct.
Okay, all right, I'm finished.
Hey, Roger?
Yes, Chief. I'm glad you broached the subject a little bit about union contracts. Having sat on both sides of the table over the years on union contracts and negotiations, am I wrong, or do I detect that in our city we have a great working relationship with not only our unions, but there seems to be a good working relationship between the administrators of our police department, that is our chiefs and our lieutenants, and with the rank and file? Is that a correct assumption on my part? Because I just feel that there's a good working relationship there. And would you say that helps?
Absolutely helps. One of the things that I take a lot of pride in is I want, if there's an issue, if the union has something that they want to discuss, come to me, let's discuss it. We can handle this without jumping through hoops and spending money on grievance procedures and things like that. I try to be very open and transparent inside and outside the department, and I think
Can't hear
We've
you.
lost your voice again.
Yeah, you can't.
There you go.
You're back.
be better. Can you hear me any better now?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
did you get what I said there, or do I need to repeat?
Just the last part I didn't catch, but I get the gist.
Okay.
Heidi?
Yeah, well, there's the issue of officer misconduct, and then there's the issue of officer conduct within a policy that may no longer be working very well. So some of the complaints that I have heard over the years or have made myself, I generally get the response that, well, they were following policy. So do we have a systematic structure of looking at policy and changing policy that doesn't work anymore or is really behind the times? Or is this something that kind of happens whenever we get a new chief?
No, it's something that happens regularly, and it is spelled out actually in our policy that it's the chief's responsibility. Chief Lee actually did a very, very good job of reviewing policies and updating them. Since I've taken this position for 3.5 weeks ago, I think I've updated 3 policies. It's very important, like you said.
Uh-oh.
Excuse me, Chief. I think maybe I can take over for you since you're having some microphone issues.
Mm-hmm.
So again, and thank you for the question. So my answer to that would be, when we're looking at complaints against our officers, we're evaluating a number of things. Did they conform to our policies and procedures? But then aside from all of that, we have rules of conduct, and we have at least 90 rules of conduct for our officers. So when we're investigating an officer complaint, it's not just necessarily were they acting within policy. It's were they performing and acting within appropriate rules of conduct. So they're not entirely protected by policy. So I don't want people to think that that is some type of shield that will protect officers who are being rude, discourteous, or acting in a manner in which we do not wish the police department to be represented, really. And in looking at the overall number of complaints that we get against police officers, it's important to note that some officers who are the most active and do the most enforcement, and in some of the areas that tend to generate complaints, of course, they're going to get more complaints than does the officer who's not pulling their load. So, and we certainly don't want to get into a situation where a police officer kind of goes hands off and says, you know what, it seems like the more I do, the more trouble I get into, the more complaints I generate. Of course, that's not what any of us want. So it's not purely numbers driven. We're looking at the behavior of that officer and have they done something that was inappropriate or was against our rules of conduct. I hope that answers your question.
Well, almost. That's very good, because it's good to make a distinction.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can have a policy that's no longer really suitable.
And sometimes, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, my question is there a formal process, or is there some kind of process where if citizen complaints come in and it's really policy related, is there some process that
a policy will be looked at. You know, it's not necessarily the officer's conduct.
Mhm.
You know, on the national scale, the policy of the chokeholds. I know that we don't, we do not allow for that. But if we have a policy that's egregious, that people complain about, is there a structure in place that a policy would come up for a review?
Absolutely. So go ahead, Chief.
I'm sorry. I say, if you can hear me now.
Kind of.
One of the things that I will say to that question is that every time we get a complaint and we investigate that complaint, part of our investigation is, are the policies related to that investigation relevant? That's part of the final, our findings is if our policies are outdated, we need to look at that. We need to update those. Additionally, it's now my job to constantly be reviewing and updating policies. So it is done on a regular basis.
Thank you.
Mr. Kuhar?
Yeah, that all being said, how do you feel about the proposal that the governor's made about licensing police officers? So it would have more of a, I guess, a record on the officers. So like a driver's license, if you get a certain amount of points, the union couldn't stop you from losing your job because you violated the point structure.
Yeah, so that was actually the next thing I was going to jump into was the Governor DeWine's reform measures. So I'm glad you brought that up. I think that to an extent with some of these reform measures the governor is proposing, we have to wait and see what they look like. A lot of Governor DeWine's proposals are measures that he's asked the Ohio General Assembly to look at and pass some regulations on. So on the surface, it sounds like a great idea. I would like to see what it looks like in practice and what some of the kind of the measures are with the licensing and what would cause you to be sanctioned and what wouldn't.
I know with the real estate licensing, it's, if you get complaints against you, it's looked at by a board, and if there's disciplinary action, then you're dealt with. Be waiting to look at that future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, go ahead, Chief.
Okay, so I'll move forward then into the police reform measures that Governor DeWine has spoken about recently. So I broke that down into things that are going to be done at the local level and things that are done at the state level. So obviously the local level stuff, although the state level stuff may impact us, the local level stuff are the things that we accomplish here within our agency. So the first step of that is the state is agreeing to fund 6 hours of training for every officer in the state in 3 different topics. One of the topics is use of force. One of the topics is implicit bias, and the other topic is de-escalation.
I got a question here.
Tracy?
Yeah, I noticed on the what we got in the packet, you had a lot of training, which is great. I wanted to know, is that training ongoing? I mean, do you have this every year? You have to take it every year, or is it just like a one and done type of a thing?
To best answer that question, some of it is done every year and some of it is not done every year, but is done relatively continuously. So, for instance, use of force. Our policy on use of force, which is an Ohio collaborative regulated issue, requires that we train and test all of our officers on the topic of use of force every year. So that is done, not only trained, but tested. The topic of implicit bias is the other topic, one of the other topics I mentioned. We trained on that in 2016. We do have policies that relate to bias-based policing and profiling issues that we train on an annual basis. But the broad topic as a whole, the last time we trained on that was 2016. De-escalation is the next kind of hot topic that we speak of. We have 15 CIT trained officers. It's I believe one of the highest numbers in the county for CIT trained officers.
What does CIT stand for?
That's great.
It is crisis intervention team. Okay. So the crisis intervention team officers specialize in dealing with mental illness. and de-escalation related to mental illness. So we actually have upcoming training scheduled this year for de-escalation related to mental illness. So we have a decent amount of training on all of that. Also, the course in 2016 that the state put us all through encompassed all three of those topics.
So do you think that upping it to like twice a year instead of once a year would be beneficial or not?
That's a good question, and I think it's going to require some thought, quite honestly. If we're talking about use of force, is that what you mean, or?
Yeah, or these other critical ones, like, well, implicit bias training, they've shown that really isn't very effective. So I don't know how effective that is, but yeah, like the serious ones, like use of force, racial profiling, things like that.
I don't think a reminder could ever hurt in those areas. The de-escalation stuff, I mean, absolutely. I like to say it this way. As police officers, we probably have somewhere in the neighborhood of, throughout the course of our careers, a month, 2 months of training in de-escalation related to mental health issues. And you look at a clinical counselor, a psychologist, or a psychiatrist, and how much training those people have. We're not as equipped to deal with that stuff as they are. It's something that is put onto us, and we welcome the opportunity. I mean, we are certainly willing to do whatever we can to help, but absolutely, I mean, more training would be extremely beneficial in some of those areas.
So then in those areas, what would you, because as you say, that's not your specialty, that's not your area. What would you think about being teamed up with somebody then who has an expertise in that? And so that, like other places have been talking about, when the calls come in, police shouldn't always get reference for the call. They should be, transferred over to somebody else, like a mental health person or something like that.
So I can touch on that. This could be a very long discussion on that topic. So I will touch on it. One of the things I will say is I think a team approach is possible and reasonable. As long as everyone is on board and trains together and knows how everyone else is going to respond and react. Where I think we start to go a little astray on that topic is to say that simply refer it over to a mental health approach. I think that you will struggle as a profession or as a society to find a lot of mental health professionals who are willing to go out in the community and deal with some of these issues in the community, just from a safety standpoint, quite honestly.
Yeah, well, that's what I was thinking. I was thinking the professionals would be part of the police department, and that would be their specialty.
Sure, and again, I mean, that's could be a very long, drawn out answer, and I think that maybe something you and I can speak about it at some other time. But it's something that there would definitely have to be a lot of conversations and a lot of planning to go into it. I think it could be effective.
Yeah.
Chief, why don't we continue, because we could be all night. So go ahead, Dave.
Can I just jump in? Because one of the things that I learned in this process, because I spent a lot of time lately with Nick and Mike, even though we're a relatively small department, we have, even internally, counseling resources, Jeff Langstaff, that a lot of departments wouldn't have. And so, again, we're not the size of a Cleveland or an Akron where we're going to have a division devoted to anything like that. But I mean, it really is sort of it's impressive, at least that it's, a recognition of the need, and that there's a staff person devoted to that, to sort of the counseling aspect side. It's not enough, obviously. And, look, mental health services is just like everything else, has had decreases in funding. So there's less of those services available. I mean, it's a complex problem, right? We talk about it. And Nick always mentions, he was the one that kind of pointed out to me that, don't forget, we've got an opioid crisis, we've got a meth crisis, we've got mental health crisis, we've got homeless crisis, we got economic. So all of those things, people fall through the cracks, and at the bottom of that crack stands a police officer. And so they're tasked with challenges that are far bigger than strictly public safety. And that's where it puts there's so much distress at that particular point, and they're being asked to solve issues that are well beyond both their training and their capability. I mean, they're not mental health, as Nick pointed out, he's not a mental health counselor. Trust me, I know him. You know, I mean, it's a really complex problem, and I'm not trying to. You guys know this. It's just we all are so anxious to try to solve things, but I do caution that these are great conversations. But man, we're in it for the long haul, because there are so many layers of this problem. I think I saw it was either in Cranes or one of the newspapers today. It was like a record month of meth, or no, opioid. I think it was opioid problems, whether it was arrests or overdoses. So we are surrounded with epidemics and pandemics right now. And anyways, you know it. I'll stop. Sorry, Nick, go ahead.
All right. So just to quickly kind of go through some of the other things that Governor DeWine put out. He's asking that the General Assembly pass a law that police departments are not allowed to investigate their own fatal uses of force. That's something that we've had 2 fatal uses of force in my career in our city, and they've both been investigated independently outside of our department. It's something that we've always done. It's just the right thing to do. I'm sorry, was there a question?
No. We just lost you for a minute, that's all.
Okay. Banning of chokeholds. That is another thing that the governor put out. We've had chokeholds have been banned in our city, at least since I started here. We've banned chokeholds. And lastly is the state's going to try to come up with some funding to help local cities fund body cameras. Lieutenant Lewis can speak a lot more about body cameras than I can real quick. If you have questions about body cameras or anything, we can touch on that stuff briefly. But one of the things that I would like to kind of point out in what I'm saying in all this is when it relates to the President's Task Force report on 21st century policing.
Can't hear you.
Lost you again, Chief.
Get this guy a new computer.
Must have Bridget's.
Nope.
Maybe I can finish for him. I think what we can say in summary is that with the reforms that we're seeing, or the calls for reform that we're seeing, whether it be nationally or on the state level, or even from the local level, from our own residents in the city of Kent who have been reaching out to us, making suggestions and recommendations, we're very proud to say that we are already in compliance with so many of these. As the chief mentioned, 25 of 28 already. That's tremendous. And understanding that we can always improve, and we are always looking to improve, and we're always welcoming and embracing suggestions and recommendations from our residents, the public, looking at other police departments and examining their policies. This is such a complicated issue. Police training and police policies is just so different all over the state of Ohio, all over the country, but even within our own state, you would not believe the variation of training and policies in policing, even in the exact same state. So there was an article recently that pointed out that police officers require less training for certification than do barbers.
Yeah.
And that was a very interesting point. We require just over 700 hours of training, while barbers require, I think, approximately 1,500 hours.
Yeah.
In the city of Kent, your training doesn't stop when you leave the police academy. It hasn't started yet. So when we bring people on board, and it doesn't matter if they only have the police academy in their background, or if they've completed the police academy and have 5 years of experience on another police department somewhere in the state of Ohio, they are going through our training program. And that is the better part of 6 months, and can be longer in some instances. So we do a considerable amount of training here, and a continuing training each and every year. And we're looking to expand on that. And training dollars and training time is very, very limited. And if everything is a priority, then nothing is a priority. So it's always a challenge from year to year. What are we going to focus on? Are we going to focus on mental illness or substance addiction and abuse or use of force and de-escalation training? It's always something. It's kind of a moving target. But all that considered, and the different things that we have seen and had to focus on just in the past few years, I think that we're doing a pretty good job, and I hope that we're able to reflect that. But we are always ears open for more.
Heidi?
Could you talk about body cameras, please?
Sure.
Because I know that I've gotten a lot of requests from the public on this topic.
Right, and Chief Scheer said that I could speak quickly on that. I'm sorry to say that is not a quick conversation. There's a lot of information there to digest, and we started looking at body cameras back in 2015. And some of you may very well be familiar with this. I did some research and even created a presentation, and I kind of made the rounds around the city because I wanted a lot of input and feedback from our residents about how they felt about body cameras. So I created a presentation, and it wasn't biased in any way. I didn't say whether we wanted cameras or not, but I just presented the facts, the good and the bad, that everybody has to know when looking at body cameras. And I made the rounds at the Rotary, the Lions Club, the Kent Area Chamber of Commerce, just to name a few, but a number of other places. And I presented the facts behind it, and I asked our residents, do you think they're necessary? Because ultimately, we're not paying for them. It's tax dollars. And do we want to put that burden on our community? And what we've seen now that body cameras have been out for a number of years, a lot of research is saying they haven't had the impact that we had hoped. There was a study that was done in Washington, D.C., where police officers, approximately 2,600 of them, were equipped with body cameras. And it showed almost no effect on complaints against police officers or the number of use of force incidents. So we have to put that information out there ahead of time before our community makes a substantial financial investment in those cameras. From my standpoint, and I'm comfortable speaking for Chief Scheer on this, and I'd say almost all of our officers here, we welcome body cameras at the police department. I think that we always conduct ourselves as though we are being recorded, because a lot of times we are, with how popular cell phones and smartphones are right now. But we always conduct ourselves as though we're being recorded, and we would welcome body cameras, but with that comes an expense. I'll open it to questions. No questions as of yet? Okay.
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you do have cameras in every cruiser, correct?
We have cameras in every cruiser. Yes, we have for many years.
Now that you usually get a lot of, you tape almost everything then already.
Yes, in fact, our policy on cruiser cams has recently become a lot more stringent, where we used to record all traffic stops and any interactions that happened near the roadway. Now those officers, we wear a microphone on our person that is always with us, and we're trying to record incidents that happen outside of the camera view, even into homes and even into apartments, to, as best we can, capture all the interactions that we have on the street. But there's range restrictions with that microphone.
Oh, that's very good. Very good. Thank you. That's all.
Sure. Thank you.
I can pick up that left off. I apologize. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yep. At the moment.
All right. So the last thing that I want to go into is what's called the Ohio Collaborative. The Ohio Collaborative came out in actually came out, I think, in 2015. But it was started in 2014. Governor Kasich at the time put together a task force of 24 members from all walks of life, very similar to the president's task force. And what their job and their goal was is to look into police reform and what relevant police reform could we come up with. From that task force, they came out with what's called the Ohio Collaborative. The Ohio Collaborative is a set of currently, I believe, 9 standards related to policy, training, and ultimately some form of oversight about police reform. The standards are in the categories of community engagement, investigating employee misconduct, bias-free policing, dispatch training standards, body cameras. The body camera standard does not require you have body cameras. It does require you comply with certain standards if you do have body cameras. One is use of force, recruiting and hiring, and our pursuit policy. Now, the pursuit policy is the newest standard. We believe we are in compliance, but we're still waiting on that certification from the state. But aside from that, that standard literally came out last week on pursuits. Aside from that, we are 100% in compliance. It's a researchable fact on the Ohio Collaborative's website that you can go and see that we are in compliance with their standards at the state level and everything they have.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. That's all I have in terms of planned presentations. I would be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have. Again, some of this stuff may get into some complex issues that may require some conversation later between us. And I'd be happy to entertain any phone calls, face-to-face meetings, emails from any of you and work together in any way that we can.
We've lost you again. So we'll just say thank you very much. Tracy?
I have a comment. Yeah, I just wanted to say over the years under Chief Lee, I've really seen a change in the culture. I mean, at first, I called an officer in to investigate something I thought was a little fishy, and I was treated as a criminal myself. This was before Chief Lee. And over the years, whenever there's a traffic stop in my ward, I go over to make sure that things are going okay. And the officers have always been courteous and respectful to the people that they're working with. So over the years, I've seen that development. And I think it's really excellent.
Thank you for that.
Mayor?
I guess we're kind of coming to the end of this for 5 years now. And I think the only one who's going to back me up from council is Gwen. You know, Mike Lewis offers a police academy class every spring, and I bring it up at council meeting, asking each and every one of you to try your best to attend it. I mean, you got to know what your police department is doing. I'm done.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, we done?
That was only informational, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief Scherer and Lieutenant Lewis. We appreciate it.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The Finance Committee, Mr. DeLeone.
Alrighty, we'll do the proposed 2021 county tax budget. Dave or Rhonda?
Well, yeah, this is pretty routine stuff tonight. I mean, even though Rhonda's pretty brand new, I think she can even just talk you through this because it's about one sentence. It's a requirement for us to get our estimate of resources and our projected expenses kind of within the ballpark range to the county, and the tax rates have to show that we can pay our bills. And again, you'll get your chance at our detailed budget in the September, October, November timeframe. So this really just kind of is a procedural step for us. So Rhonda, I don't know if you want to add any more to that.
No, it's in compliance with the Ohio Revised Code 5705. We have to pass the tax budget by the 15th of July, so we could submit it to Cuyahoga County Auditor by July 20th.
Questions from anyone? We don't have an audience online, do we?
No.
Okay, then I'll go back to council.
Move to approve with emergency.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It passes. Now we're going to fire levy.
Yeah, so this is, I'm sorry, no, go ahead.
No, go ahead, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm not talking, you talk.
Oh. So this ordinance or this resolution is just to, it's a resolution to proceed so that we can actually put it on the ballot for the November election. And if it doesn't get on the November, we have potentially 3 chances next year to get it on a ballot next year. But you already submitted the resolution of necessity. You passed that last month this is the next process before we can actually take it down to the county election board and get it on the ballot.
Chief Tosco, you have anything to say?
He's
You're
muted.
muted.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, this levy is helps to fund the operations at the West Side Fire Station. The monies go towards the that 101 fund, and helps provide just operating funds for personnel.
Very good. Any questions from council? Seeing none, back to council. Any?
Move to authorize with the emergency.
Second by John. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Thanks, Chief and Rhonda. Sanitary sewer pump station easements. What are we doing, Jim?
Yeah, Jim, I don't have a ton of the details. I know he's been working on this. This is a sanitary sewer pump station. Some work needs to go on around that. And I think he's got some easement agreements that he's got ready for council's approval. I think there's a bunch of them. I can't remember if we decided to do them all in one slot or update me, Jim, because I don't remember.
Sure. So this project, if you may or may not recall, is we're replacing pump station on Middlebury Road and eliminating a pump station in Yakavona Park. And to run a sewer from Yakavona Park's pump station down to Middlebury. And where we're running the sewer, we need to get easements. In total, we need 11 permanent easements and 11 temporary easements from 16 parcels. We've had public meetings on the issue with the owners. We've met with all the owners individually. And currently we have 4 temporary easements that have been agreed to for the appraised value. So we're asking your approval for those 4. And then we'd also ask for your approval if the property owners agree to the appraised value on the remaining 15 parcels, that just allow us to bring those to council directly versus the committee.
So in other words, like we've done in the past.
Yes, very much so.
We do the ones before and now the ones that come later. All right. Any questions for Jim? I don't see any. Back to council. Any?
Move to approve with emergency.
Second.
Now that is the approving the ones that he's got agreements to, and then the ones he comes up further with.
Yes.
Okay.
All of them.
All of them. All right. Any further discussion? Back to council. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes.
Thank you very much, Ian.
All right. Budget appropriations, Rhonda.
Thank you. One a month, I guess. I would like to request council to approve the amended appropriations I submitted to the city manager in a memo dated June 23rd. And if you have any questions, I can answer them now.
Questions? Seeing none, back to council.
Move to authorize with emergency.
Second.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes. And the CARES Act, an ordinance. Where's Hope at?
I'm right here.
Oh, there you are. I just see your name.
I know. I'm not going to let Dave be a ball hog.
Okay.
This ordinance that we're actually, if you pass it or approve it at committee, we're going to have a special meeting tonight for you to pass it. This ordinance is required by the state of Ohio in order for the city to get any funding from the federal government under the CARES Act. If we do not pass this ordinance promising to abide by all the rules of the CARES Act in the distribution and how we use the money, we won't get the money. So if you pass it, what we will do is we will present it both to the fiscal officer and the Ohio Budget Management Office in order to prove that we're in compliance, and then we will get our money. And I believe the last I heard, our allotted amount was over $900,000.
Correct.
Yeah.
Questions from council?
Yeah.
Tracy.
So if we don't spend all the money, then we give the remaining stuff back?
Yes, we do.
Okay. And it's
Further questions?
Yeah.
Oh, go on, Tracy.
It specifically is just for the virus, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Now, does that include paying salaries for lost revenues due to businesses closing?
It does not. It does not include any lost revenue. It's to help us cover any COVID-19 related expenditures.
So on like PPE, things like that?
Correct. Now, if somebody, we're still having a little confusion over what payroll amount it will apply to. And if somebody, instead of being furloughed, was redirected to assisting with COVID-19, sanitizing, just mitigating, trying to keep social distancing, that payroll for sure is covered. Anybody that has to quarantine is covered. Our unemployment expenditures are covered, and any material supplies and equipment that we purchase are also covered for COVID-19.
So then if somebody were to run a testing site, that would be covered?
It's potential, yes.
Okay.
But I still have to look into it for sure.
Roger, did you have your hand up? Oh, no, John.
Yeah, so from day one, city departments are pretty much had tracking sheets for the COVID expenses. Is that not correct?
Yes.
No voice.
Yeah, John, each week we submit each of us individually log our time devoted to COVID, and then we submit that to Harrison, and Harrison compiles it for the entire city. And I assume he's handing it off to Rhonda to then kind of, her and Brian and her group will make sure which parts of that are eligible under the very fluid rules.
Right.
I mean, honestly, Rhonda's been on a number, Hope too. Hope they both have been on a number of updates each week. There's like a new update from the state. What you can count, what you can't count. So they're figuring out as we go along too.
Thank you.
Robin, did you have something?
No.
Okay. I just keep seeing you blinking there. All right. So I'll go. Further questions? Okay. Although I need a
To
motion.
authorize.
Second.
You have a motion?
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Emergency.
I would move to authorize with the emergency if we need it.
And seconded by Tracy. Further discussion?
Mm-mm.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. That's it. That will take care of the CARES Act. Thanks, Hope.
Thank you, Mr. DeLeone. At this time, we're going to move into the special council meeting. Would the clerk please read the roll?
Mr. Amrhein,
Here.
Mr. DeLeone,
Here.
Mr. Ferrara,
Here.
Mr. Kuhar,
Here.
Ms. Rosenberg,
Here.
Ms. Shaffer,
Here.
Mr. Sidoti,
Here.
Mr. Turner,
Here.
and Ms. Wallach.
Here.
The purpose of tonight's meeting is authorized draft number 2020-58. Would the clerk please read that in title only?
Draft number 2020-58, an ordinance affirming that funds from the County Coronavirus Relief Distribution Fund will be expended only to cover costs of the City of Kent, Ohio, consistent with the requirements of Section 5001 of the CARES Act, as described in 42 USC 601D, and any applicable regulations as is necessary pursuant to House Bill 481 before receiving said funds and declaring an emergency.
Move suspension.
Second.
Please call the roll on suspension.
Mr. Amrhein,
Yes.
Mr. DeLeone,
Yes.
Mr. Ferrara,
Yes.
Mr. Kuhar,
Yes.
Ms. Rosenberg,
Yes.
Ms. Shaffer,
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti,
Yes.
Mr. Turner,
Yes.
and Ms. Wallach.
Yes.
Move adoption.
Adoption.
It was seconded by Heidi. Is there any discussion on this ordinance? Seeing none, please call the roll for adoption.
Mr. Amrhein,
Yes.
Mr. DeLeone,
Yes.
Mr. Ferrara,
Yes.
Mr. Kuhar,
Yes.
Ms. Rosenberg,
Yes.
Ms. Shaffer,
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti,
Yes.
Mr. Turner,
Yes.
and Ms. Wallach.
Yes.
Ordinance 2020-58 is passed.
Okay, before we adjourn, I wish you all a happy and safe 4th of July, and we'll see you on the 15th for council meeting. Oh, Mike, go ahead.
Evaluations, please.
Oh, shoot. Thanks, Mike.
Did you get mine, Mike?
Yes, I've got a few. I'm not going to say any names.
All right.
The shaming has not happened yet.
No.
They should have read your letter. It said July the 1st, you needed them.
Yes. That's today, isn't it?
Oh,
Not over yet.
oh,
You know, and
Not
We're
over yet.
okay. We're okay.
Roger.
my apologies, Mike.
Roger.
oh, I just wanted to say, I wanted to tell Hope that I really appreciated her basketball metaphor with Mr. Ruler passing the ball. I thought that was very, very timely. And since we don't have sports in our lives, just to hear you do that, Hope, it was
I think
good.
she said hog the ball.
Oh, is that what she said? Hog the ball.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Hope.
You're welcome, Mr. Sidoti.
Thank you.
Mr. Kuhar.
Yeah, this is the first 4th of July that I was able to be here and we don't have a festival going on. Of course, they won't let me in Canada, so that's why I'm here.
Understand.
Have a safe holiday,
everyone.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, John.
Everybody.
I'll miss you all at the booth.
Stay safe for the holiday weekend.